Archie Giant Series 515. Ambrose sees a sign on a store asking for someone to dress like Santa, and applies for the job, and says he already has experience flying over chimneys. I guess his potential boss assumes he means in a plane. I assume the story sped through his job interview because it'd be ridiculous if it was just one question he was asked. A kid tells him what he wants for Christmas, and Ambrose decides to use magic to give him everything he asked for, abandoning all subtlety. Security cameras would catch this, and so would everyone else. I guess witches spying on him erased the footage. An especially considerate kid says she doesn't want anything for herself, and just wants her brother to get a gift because he's hurt. Ambrose decides to heal him and give them gifts. Then he gives a bunch of other kids gifts before he could go out to lunch, and says they're all the things they would have asked him for. Unless he made his magic read their minds, he'd have no idea what they wanted and disappoint them. But they're all cheer anyways, so I guess they all saw what they wanted. Ambrose sees a homeless person and uses magic to give people food, a Christmas tree, and toys. When is Dell gonna be a jerk? Well, instead, his boss is a jerk for firing him because he didn't wear his white mustache or say ho ho ho. Ambrose would never make those mistakes. Who would? He could have effortlessly brainwashed his boss into changing his mind and forgiving him. But somehow, he accepted being fired. Conveniently, he immediately sees Sabrina, who magically changes his boss's mind. Then why didn't the experienced warlock think of that first, if he's okay with this? I'm surprised this actually happened. So the story has a happy ending because Sabrina did the smart thing, and used a spell she usually forgets. Sabrina sees a cat holding a person in green who tells him to put him down. The guy says that he's the first cat he ever saw with magical powers as good as his. Sabrina sees one of the Santa's elves. No one knows about the little elves who do most of Santa's real work. He says that the little elves check out each fireplace to make sure Santa can fit in them, and sometimes he has to come in through the front door. Wouldn't it be really loud to come in through the front door? He says that another thing the little elves have to do is check out the dogs in each neighborhood. He says that the little elves calm down the dogs in the neighborhood to keep them from acting up when Santa appears. So far, all Sabrina's contributing to this story is that because she's already used to magical things, she's calm enough that he feels like giving her all this exposition. It's still a bit boring because she's not doing anything, and he's just telling me some lore that I usually don't hear about Santa stuff. So it might be completely pointless by being only exclusive to this story. Somehow there was one year that Santa got bitten over 7,000 times because one of the elves didn't do their jobs. Why would he get bitten more than once? How would he survive that many bites in one night? If he's already fast enough to go to every house in the span of 24 hours, that means he's got super speed, so he shouldn't have to worry about dogs biting him. I was only thinking that the dogs barking to wake up everyone in the house is what he'd have to worry about. There'd have to be a magical spell involved to keep that from happening to give away Santa, who considered retiring to Florida, which is oddly relatable. The elf says that if Sabrina was a decent size, he could really show her a thing or two. She magically shrinks herself, and out of complete nowhere, he says that another one of his responsibilities is to help injured birds, which has nothing to do with Santa. He tells her to follow him and shows her the computer room, which tips off the elves on weather conditions throughout the world. So if there's a storm coming up, Santa would find out about it. This is a pretty well thought out story. The elf says it's time for him to help hungry squirrels dig up acorns, which also has nothing to do with Santa. So that's stupid too. Wouldn't he scare the squirrels? Hilda says her neighbor's kid left some cookies for Santa, and that reminds Sabrina to get out some plates from her dollhouse because she wants to leave out cookies for Santa's little helpers too. Then there's a page where Hilda and Sabrina are flying on brooms when they think it's freezing, because for no reason there isn't a heat spell to keep them warm in the cold, and for no reason they think they have to go the rest of the way on foot despite their magical powers. Even though they know where they're going and it's Santa's workshop. They've been there before, especially Sabrina, so why don't they teleport there? and it's out of character for Hilda to help bring gifts to Santa's stocking. If any witch would think to do this, why doesn't he have a lot more gifts? Ambrose tells Sabrina that he's finally taking care of the last needy family in town as a bunch of gifts are near them in a house with a pathetic Christmas tree. Good thing they get to do this without Dell and Hilda stopping them a long time ago. Sabrina points out a struggling mailman who can't wait for the holidays to end, and uses magic, telling the spirits to help him deliver his mail with the speed of hail. He says that this bag feels really light, assumes that the snow must be fogging up his mind because the letters have already been delivered, and is happy that for once he'll be in time to open gifts with his family. I hope that's all that happens to him and this doesn't backfire on him. Sabrina sees people trying to shovel their walks, and redundantly commands the genie to appear, when she could just cast the spell herself. She for some reason says the French phrase for immediately, and he says he's from the Near East and not used to snowy weather. So he says he'll summon his buddies from the North Pole to do the shoveling job. That doesn't seem to backfire either. Sabrina sees last-minute shoppers who are so jammed together that they can't get to the articles they want. She uses magic to bring articles to the shoppers. Conveniently, they're happy about the gift they wanted coming to them. I guess they conveniently attribute this to a higher power and not witchcraft. And Sabrina contacted the spirits and told them to find out what exact gifts these guys wanted, because she didn't know that. Magic just scanned their memories to find out. I thought they'd freak out at the place being haunted, or assume the stress is finally getting to them. Sabrina uses magic so that people's money fly out of the purses to pay for their purchases for them. And they wonder how the store is doing this and says it must be computers that did it. They would have just freaked out. They'd wonder why it didn't happen the next time. This is condescending because it doesn't make any sense. Sabrina apologizes to Hilda because she hasn't decorated their tree yet, and Hilda cares about this, and arbitrarily says that Sabrina has no Christmas spirit. She wouldn't think that. And I see we're dealing with good Hilda today. Either it's a different universe every time she's good Hilda, or her family is completely used to the fact that sometimes she's good Hilda and sometimes she's not. It was a twist that her magic didn't backfire and she could get away with all of her good deeds. Sabrina complains that apparently every Christmas Eve her aunts sneak out all night. She wonders what's going on. If she's known about this for years, she could have turned invisible and followed them years ago to find out. I assume she didn't because she was scared of her witch aunts using magic against her. Hilda decides to humor her because it's about time they revealed their secret to her. If they're keeping it a secret, I guess it's about them doing good things. But you'd think Della would have revealed what they did in front of Sabrina by now because she'd badger them about it. Every Christmas Eve, they give their old friend a helping hand, Santa. This is quite a contrast from other Sabrina stories where Hilda either talked like Santa didn't exist or disapproved of him and wanted to prove she was more impressive than him. Here it's a completely different Hilda. It sure is convenient that they're the ones who do this instead of any of the other witches on Earth. It'd feel less contrived if what they did every night was helping people out like charity workers instead of this. Hilda uses magic because Santa got stuck in a chimney, and she says that while he used to not need her help, he's getting older. You'd expect them to never age and be immortal. Hilda has to check the house for obstacles because it's dark inside, and she uses magic to keep Santa from tripping over the stool. This isn't like her, so I want an explanation. I assume she used magic to give herself night vision. She replenishes Santa's bag of toys, which saves him hundreds of trips back to the pole. Somehow the reason they're secretive about their help is that they don't want to hurt Santa's feelings. He'd think he couldn't handle the job himself. Wouldn't he question that he doesn't have to go on hundreds of trips back anymore? He says that some people say he should retire. Since when? I do think that the reason they're secretive about this is that witches are pressured to not do good deeds, and they don't want Sabrina to know about this. But instead they're out of character by that not being addressed at all, which is more sympathetic of them, but confusing. Just say that Hilda got character development because she knew Sabrina. The first story is about Ambrose being a really nice Santa using his magic to help people. He gets fired, but Sabrina undoes that.
The second story is about explaining away why Santa's able to do what he does by coming up with a bunch of little elves that help him. And Sabrina only gets all of this exposition because her cat found one of them and she's a witch. So I like all of the different ways the writer tried to make the Santa myth make more sense. It required a lot of thought, explaining why stuff like fireplaces of varying sizes, dogs, and storms don't stop him. Then there's a story where Sabrina uses magic a whole bunch of times to make people's lives easier when they're Christmas shopping. And she uses magic on the way to the shop too. It's very convenient that people don't freak out. At least if they explained that they think it's a higher power that did this for them, it would explain why they're not terrified, even if I wouldn't like that being referenced. It was nice to see her basically be a superhero and get away with it. The final story was about Sabrina's aunts using magic to help Santa when he's delivering presents, and expecting us to believe they do that every year. And I've done it for years. While it's good that Hilda's doing good, in a moral sense, it's sloppy writing to have her be out of character with no explanation. She's the proudly stereotypical evil witch. There's no reason for Hilda to be in this story. In the 70s cartoon, Zelda was clearly the nice meek one compared to Hilda. So it should have been Zelda instead of Hilda because that doesn't contradict her character. Here, Hilda is portrayed as just like Zelda, being a nice person completely unironically, with no lampshading of it. They somehow expect the audience not to question it. That's not even getting into the fact that how are they the only witches that are helping Santa? It's not like they're the only witch family on Earth. But I have to assume that's the case in this universe.